Okay, wonderful. Great, so we have mostly everyone online here. I see Dr. Miron join. Hello, how are you?
Hi, good, and you?
Doing well, thank you. I'm glad to see that you're able to access the call. The videos are all working. Everyone's looking wonderful. Thank you so much. I do see that we've started the webinar, so we're out of our practice session, which means we will have attendees joining. So hello to those attendees, the early birds, if you will. We appreciate your time and attention this evening and your patience as we just finish up with some tests and last minute conversations. So I will also mention right now that we are recording this event. We intend to upload it to our YouTube, but if anybody, the panelists or the attendees, not necessarily feel comfortable with this, please let us know. You can reach out to chapters@neurotechx.com or myself at Brian, BRYAN @neurotechx.com, and we'd be happy to either edit out your section or just not post that video widely entirely, whatever you're comfortable with. Okay, so it's 6:30, which means most people will be thinking about joining and should be joining shortly. Before I'm going to put on like a landing screen so everybody can see the event details and whatnot. Is there any questions that you have to the panelists before we get underway? Sorry, any of the panelists, do you have questions for me about the event programming? Good, I realized that could have been ambiguous for the attendees as well. Okay, great. So I'll just ask that you turn your videos off and mute yourselves for now, and then I will share my screen and away we go in a few minutes. Thank you. Okay, welcome to the panelists that have recently joined, or sorry, the participants, attendees that have recently joined us. We'll get started in a few minutes. We're just waiting for others to join, and then we'll get started shortly. So thank you for your patience and your attendance, and away we go very soon. Okay, excellent. Thank you everyone for attending this evening. I see that we've had a few more individuals join in the last 30 seconds, but understanding that everybody has busy schedules and are contributing their valuable time and expertise this evening, I think it's best that we get things underway. I will also just turn on my video here so you can see me reporting in from my home office. Hello. Great, so thank you and welcome everyone to our event this evening. We are celebrating the incredible neurotech efforts that are happening right here in Toronto in our own backyard. It is my distinct pleasure to introduce this event today, beyond the honor, of course, hosting our speakers and our participants for tonight's event. It's an honor because I started my Neurotech X journey in Toronto. And the Toronto community has a special place in my heart, in particular the Neurotech TO community. It's lovely to see so many familiar faces in the call, as well as so many new faces. So thank you again to the speakers, to the participants, to the attendees, to everybody supporting Neurotech TO, Neurotech X, Branch Out and beyond, and the neurotechnology field as a whole. We appreciate it and your interest. Thank you as well to Branch Out Neurological Foundation for sponsoring the event and for their continued support of NTX in Toronto and around the world. To provide a brief overview of our agenda for today, we're going to start off with an introduction about Neurotech X from myself. I'll then hand things off to Ty McKinney, who's on the line, to do an introduction of Branch Out Foundation and all the amazing things that they're doing there. I will then transition into our panel discussion, which will be moderated by Dr. John Griffiths, who's a chapter lead at Neurotech TO and an assistant professor at the University of Toronto and scientist at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health. He'll be doing introductions for our panelists. As you can see, we'll be hearing from Ms. Julia Ripkena, who's on the call, as well as Dr. Jean-Philippe Miron and Dr. Andrea Diaconescu. So a fantastic lineup for everyone this evening. I've been waiting for this for weeks. I'm very, very, very excited to learn and grow with all of you together. Some housekeeping as well. Oh, sorry. One thing, we'll wrap the event up with some community pitches, which it's kind of a callback to the Neurotech TO days and events before isolation and the pandemic, where we were able to really give a space for our community members to voice their ideas, their projects, their theories, and beyond. And so we've asked that we have a few companies present today or pitch their neurotechnology products. So we're going to hear from V-Light, ReadySpec, and Telemag. And then we'll also hear from Branch Out as well in that. And then we will turn things over to our community, those on the call, if they would like to present any cool things that they've been reading, maybe that they've been working on, that they've been thinking. We'd love to get a discussion going around those ideas. Okay, so now some housekeeping. So I'm sure we're all familiar with Zoom etiquette, but I'll just say it for the sake of saying it. Please try to stay muted throughout the talks, and we'd ask that you kindly keep your video off as well, more so just for respect and to not distract the speakers. We do, of course, encourage that you unmute, and you can reveal yourself by turning on your camera if you would like to ask questions during the discussion sections of the evening. But during the actual talks themselves, we ask that you stay muted and your video off. Second, we are recording this event. I see someone has used the Q&A window already, which will get to my next point, but we are recording this session, and we are aiming to host it on YouTube as well. So anyone who's interested in this, but unfortunately not able to attend today, can watch it again on YouTube. And please do use the Zoom Q&A to send your questions along to our host and along to our speakers today. Finally, again, I'd just like to stress that you please do feel free to join those community pitches, and it's something that I really hope that we can encourage to get some amazing discussions going on about the latest and greatest neurotech in Toronto. And finally, and most importantly, let's relax and have some fun, and let's learn and grow together. So with that, I'm going to do a brief introduction to Neurotech X, at which point, once I finish up, I'll hand things over to Ty to talk about Branch Out, and then we'll hand things over to John Griffiths, who will then be able to start our panel discussion. Okay, wonderful. So Neurotech X began in 2015. It started actually as a local student club in Montreal. So it's now 5 years old. We just had our 5-year anniversary. And in those 5 years, Neurotech X has grown to become the largest international community for neurotechnology enthusiasts. Our mission, which is broad by design, I like to say, is to facilitate the advancement of neurotechnology. And we do this through many different initiatives, but generally what we aim to do is provide key resources and learning experiences, and to look to lead different initiatives globally. So Neurotech X is a volunteer-led organization with a bottom-up approach and to community development. And this has led to our community growing to a number of 16,000 plus individuals around the world. This encompasses our 6,000 member online community on Slack. I strongly encourage anyone interested in neurotechnology to join the Slack, where you can connect with like-minded enthusiasts from around the world at all times. The community has also led to the development of 3 initiatives, some of which I will highlight shortly. We've hosted actually well over 200 global events now, where I think we're closing in on 350. And you can kind of just get a sense of the spread globally of our chapters in that in the map image here on the screen. And yeah, we're over 25 chapters worldwide. I think we're going to be approaching 30 by the year's end as we onboard some new chapters now, and we got a few more in the pipeline. So it's a really exciting time to be a part of the Neurotech X community. We couldn't be doing it without the support of our hardworking community members, our volunteers, and of course our community partners, sponsors like the Branch Out Neurological Foundation and more. So it's a wonderful time to get involved. And if there's anything else you'd like to do, any cool neurotech projects you'd like to do within the community, reach out and let us know. We support our efforts that are guided by our 3 pillars here. The first pillar is community. So much like we're experiencing now together, we like to bring together individuals to connect and to grow and learn and experience neurotechnology directly together. We also like to educate individuals. So this is our second pillar. We've created, for example, our online education platform. This is really about training individuals who are interested in neurotechnology or who may already be working in neurotechnology, so we can kind of implement best practices and kind of ethical principles within the development of this field. And finally, our third pillar is innovation, where we hope to inspire those individuals within and outside of the community to really kind of utilize neurotechnology to be able to solve current and future challenges that neurotechnology would be applicable for. And so we've seen a number of incredible examples of this. A good one I can think of right now is Mindset, or as they recently rebranded out of the Montreal chapter. We've also had a few cool projects and companies spit out of the Toronto chapter and more. So it's again, there's a lot of people in the community to support your idea. And so please reach out to us if you have anything at all to talk about. And hopefully that will happen in the community session at the end of the event today. Just briefly, here is a few of our initiatives I'd like to highlight. We have our global chapters initiative, which connects many different communities from around the world together through events like this. We have our student club community, or student club initiative. I think they're going to be hosting a student club competition this year. We try to do it year over year. Last year, unfortunately, we couldn't do it, but I think it's back and better than ever this year. We also have our Slack, as mentioned, which is our online community, our EDU platform. We actually just launched a partnership with the BCI guys to do a 7 or 10 part learning module for individuals that are interested in neurotechnology but are kind of entry level. And we have our newsletter, which goes out monthly and contains all the latest and greatest news in neurotechnology. And of course, our Neurotech X services, which is a kind of 360-degree neurotech shop for your recruitment and consulting services if you're looking to build out your neurotech business. So you can find all that info and more on neurotechx.com. Please check it out and reach out with any questions at all, and stay in touch as you grow within this field, both in interest and experience. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Ty from Branch Out. So Ty, if you wouldn't mind coming online and sharing your screen, I'll just turn mine off here. I can see you there.
All right. Thank you, everybody. My name is Ty McKinney, the Research Director for Branch Out Neurological Foundation, and we are absolutely thrilled to be supporting not just this event, but also Neurotech X more broadly. And on a personal note, I'm really excited to be a part of this event as both a researcher with a focus on EEG, as well as a startup founder. So the innovation within the neurotechnology space is really near and dear to my own heart. And the story of Branch Out is in many ways analogous to many of the entrepreneurs that are probably in the audience this evening. Our vision is to see a world free from neurological disorders, including mental health conditions. Only instead of offering services and products, we empower neuroscientists to achieve this vision. Initially, we did this through funding student researchers in our specific area of complementary and alternative modalities to promoting brain health, which we have branded as Neurocam Research. However, since then, we've actually expanded the scope of our mandate to include neurotechnology, which is why we're so thrilled to be collaborating with Neurotech X. But our excitement for this partnership doesn't stop there. Over the years, through countless discussions with our funded researchers and key stakeholders within the community, we've actually identified a few gaps in our mandate that we're trying to address. The first big one was largely a lack of integration between the academic research community and those community stakeholders that I previously mentioned. So we decided to address this by creating a number of opportunities for this dialogue to occur. One of the examples of these initiatives is a fundraiser called Your Brain on Art, where we paired our neuroscientists with artists to create a personal connection to our cause, so that they could create art inspired by the neuroscience to raise awareness for our cause, as well as fundraise for more exciting research. And I'll actually just share with you briefly one of the submissions from there that I think you guys in particular from this community will really enjoy. There we go. So the piece of art here is called The Language of Nature. And it was made by an extremely talented Indigenous artist named Mackenzie Brown. And this was actually inspired by some of my own research, looking at the neurocognitive effects of being immersed within the natural environment in the Utah desert using EEG recordings. So as an Indigenous person, Mackenzie really resonated with the idea that the land that could be around us could have potential benefits for our brain health. And she reflected this within trying to incorporate little subtle hints within the painting. Perhaps the most obvious one that I think that some of us in this event tonight might be able to recognize is the wavelet transform that was used to analyze the data to pull out some of the brain waves that we were interested in looking at. So this is just one example of the way in which BranchOut really tries to be out of the box and innovative and creative with the way in which we support our neuroscientists and raise awareness for their really exciting research. In order to prepare the researchers for this event, we actually offered a number of science communication training opportunities so that when they talked with the artists and the community stakeholders, they could speak the same language. Anyone who's ever delivered a pitch, and I'm guessing that's gonna be quite a few people in the audience this evening, know how difficult it can be to succinctly communicate the really complex details of a neuroscience research project. And while we initially offered these training opportunities to just our funded students, we've actually had some requests from other organizations to expand these workshops. And we're now looking to scale this program to expand our offerings to a wider audience of neuroscientists and neurotech innovators. And this is just one example of why we're trying to be different from other funding organizations. We're not about just giving our funded researchers money, but instead we want to create a community, an ecosystem where everyone gets to thrive and grow together. So these training programs that I mentioned were really just the start of BranchOut realizing that in order for science to actually have an impact within the community, it has to leave the laboratory. The most exciting discoveries in neuroscience, even if they would win a Nobel Prize, would not benefit a single soul if it did not make the leap from the bench to the bedside. And as a small funding organization, basically a startup in a sense, we had really limited money for the grants, and we really wanted to make sure that the projects we did fund not only could get published, because of course that's important for scientists, but we also really wanted to ensure that they had the possibility to lead towards real world impact that improves the lives of not just people struggling with neurological disorders, but their caretakers, and the overall enhance the well-being of the healthcare ecosystem. And this is where our enthusiasm for partnering with Neurotech X comes in, as we're hoping that by supporting this event, we can help advance the needle on this initiative within the neurotechnology space with our partners in Toronto. I'll be speaking about a couple specific opportunities from BranchOut in the community pitch section later on, as Brian mentioned. So please join me then to learn about some of those ways that you could potentially get involved. But until then, I am absolutely excited to see the beautiful merger of innovative neuroscience, cutting edge technology, and the entrepreneurial spirit that's displayed in some of the presentations tonight, including a couple of projects that are being funded by BranchOut ourselves. And our hope is that by sponsoring this event, we will help catalyze not only the development of neurotechnologies toward real world impact, but also promoting brains at their best in the most general and equitable, democratized sense of that. So thank you very much. And I'm excited to now hear from some of the panelists.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Ty. I'll ask that Dr. John Griffiths join. I do see, yeah, there you are. Hello. I'll hand things over to you, John.
Hi, everyone. You hear me okay? Quick audio. Can I get a thumbs up on the audio? Thumbs up, Brian. Excellent. So welcome everyone to the event. This is a really exciting lineup, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So what we've got for the next section of the evening is we have three fascinating panel speakers who I'll introduce in some detail in a second. Each of them will have a short prepared presentation about some of the interesting work that they do. And then we'll have some Q&A where myself and Brian will be fielding questions from you guys and kind of synthesizing and maybe inserting one or two of our own. And we'll try and get some back and forth and some interesting discussions. So just briefly to kick off, I'll introduce myself. I'm John Griffiths. I am an assistant professor at U of T, and I work at, as Brian said, a research hospital in Toronto called the Centre for Addiction and Mental Health. And the work that I do, the research team that I'm leading there, I like to think of as combining in a productive way computational neuroscience and neuroimaging. So what we do is we build models of brain activity to try and develop some deeper understanding of the mechanistic processes that generate the signals that you see in neuroimaging techniques like EEG and fMRI, and also things like neural responses to brain stimulation. And of course, we're interested in applications in psychiatry and neurology and other aspects of healthcare as well. So that's the work that I do, and I hope there'll be a few intersections, I think, with some of the speakers here. I want to just insert a quick comment as well about Neurotech X, because as Brian mentioned, I'm one of the chapter leads of the Neurotech chapter, and I really want to just thank the organization and speak to the kind of how impressed I've been with how this society has grown over the last few years that I've been involved. And one just anecdote that really kind of brought that home was when we were putting together the preparation for the year in review series. That was an event that happened, I think 2 months ago now. So this was a kind of around the world event. There were about 20 versions of this event going on different places around the world, and the prep call for that. So we had a Zoom call, and it was the chapter leads from all of the places involved. There was about 60-70 people on this Zoom call from around the world, with just a huge range of fascinating backgrounds and experiences, everyone from engineers to kind of academic scientists like myself, and people in industry, people in students, educators. And that kind of melting pot of disciplines, extending a lot past just the kind of core, I'd say, scientific research, but really into like all areas of society. That's something that Neurotech X does really well. So and that's thanks to everyone who's involved at this event, and everyone who's listening in, and just the community in general. So I just want to kind of give everyone a pat on the back for making that happen by their attendance at events like this. Wonderful. So let me get to an introduction of the panel, and then we'll hear about some of the things that they have to tell us. So I'll do the introductions, and then I'll nominate each person in turn to give us their prepared speech. Okay. So firstly, we have Ms. Julia Ripkena. So Julia is a patient research liaison from the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute, and she has been working on stopping memory decline in multiple sclerosis patients using a pretty cool and simple accessible intervention, which is Google Street View. And she's interested in developing this as an intervention and finding the best strategies to deliver this. So I believe that's what we'll be hearing from her shortly. Our second panelist is Dr. Jean-Philippe Miron. Dr. Miron is an assistant clinical professor in the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Montreal, and he co-directs the Psychiatric Neuromodulation Unit at the Central Hospital in the University of Montreal. And he specializes in the clinical application and development of treatment strategies for refractory psychiatric disorders. Strategies such as repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, vagus nerve stimulation, direct current stimulation, and related interventions. So we'll hopefully be hearing some interesting things from him on that. And then our third panelist is Dr. Andrea Diaconescu. Andrea is a close colleague of mine at Center for Addiction and Mental Health, and I can absolutely speak to the fascinating and important scientific work that she's doing. So this is definitely going to be interesting and actually quite novel as well. I mean, I think you'll all hear there's always something interesting and different in the kind of descriptions about Andrea's work. So Andrea has previously, she's worked in Basel and Zurich in the area of cognitive neuroscience and computational neuroscience as applied to psychiatry. And she has a particular research interest and expertise in cognitive and computational models of the emergence and persistence of delusions in psychoaffective disorders like schizophrenia. Excellent. So I'm going to hand it over to Julia. Julia, please take it away.
All right, 1 second. I'm just going to screen share. All right. Hello, and thank you for having me at this event. I'm very excited to tell you a little bit about our spatial navigation intervention that I've been working on for the past couple of years for people living with progressive multiple sclerosis. I'm currently a master's student, so this has been my baby project for the past little while. And I'm defending very soon, so I'm very excited to show you some of our results. So a quick introduction, this is our study team. The direct supervisors of this project are Dr. Robin Green and Dr. Asaf Gilboa. They're both senior scientists at the University of Toronto, at the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute, and also the psychology department at U of T. We also have been close collaborators with Dr. Tanya Bruno, who's a physiatrist, working with people with MS. And there's also a number of different students and other scientists who've been of incredible help helping to guide and make this project happen. We are located at the Toronto Rehabilitation Institute, downtown Toronto, and also very closely affiliated with the University of Toronto, and share some of the MRI scanning space with them there. So as a quick outline, I'll be just briefly introducing multiple sclerosis to you, telling you a little bit about some of the principles for promoting brain health, and telling you the preliminary efficacy and feasibility findings of our intervention, and summarizing some of these key findings as well as the clinical implications. So as a quick introduction, multiple sclerosis is an immune-mediated disease affecting the central nervous system of the brain, resulting in significant chronic disability, both physical and cognitive. Canada is disproportionately affected with approximately 4,000 new cases per year. And as you can see there, the prevalence is also one of the highest in the world. Approximately 40 to 75% of people with MS do experience cognitive impairment. It sometimes often is perceived as like a mobility disorder, having a lot of physical side effects. However, cognition is very important and has been largely overlooked. It's one of the factors mostly responsible for unemployment in the population, and can significantly prevent individuals from participating in daily hobbies and their daily life, and being social, and doing very rudimentary things like going shopping or interacting with their friends or loved ones. And in general, the Statistics Canada reports do project an increase in economic and clinical burden over the next 10 years. So it's important to think about what happens in the brain of multiple sclerosis patients. So it has been traditionally thought of as a white matter demyelinating disease, but there is increasing evidence showing significant gray matter deterioration as well, globally in the CNS. Specifically, neuronal loss, cortical and overall cerebral atrophy has been associated with the progressive phase of MS, as well as the clinical disability and worsening of cognitive impairment. On the right is a paper that was published in Nature Reviews that did a great job of summarizing all of the different ways the brain is affected in people with MS. And of my particular interest is the hippocampi, which you can see on the right and the left there, because hippocampi are so very important for cognition, specifically memory and spatial navigation, and long-term and short-term memory recall, and and yeah, so I've been studying that for a while, and in general, hippocampi have been linked with like a very good cognitive performance, and our hippocampi shrink over our lifetime in general in the healthy aging population. Hippocampi also have been shown to atrophy in other populations like Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment, other dementias, and also traumatic brain injury. And so MS is no different. Smaller hippocampal volumes have been related to poorer verbal memory in MS, and has been shown to begin as early as 2 to 6 months post-clinically isolated syndrome, which is one of the very first neurological episodes that predict future diagnosis of MS. So essentially can begin even prior to diagnosis. And an annual hippocampal decrement of 5.9% has also been reported in the research literature. It's very similar to Alzheimer's disease and MCI, but significantly higher than the healthy aging population. And so it's important to target this brain area, and there are a few key principles for promoting brain health in general. So first, and a very popular one, is cognitive environmental enrichment, which posits that engaging in novel, challenging, and complex tasks can elicit beneficial morphological changes to our brain. This is often known as use it or lose it phenomenon, and there's a long-standing history of research backing up this principle. It started off with mouse models where they looked at enriched environments for mice versus standard environments, and showing that larger hippocampal volumes were related to the enriched environment as opposed to the standard environment. And so far it has been also extended to the human samples as well, where things like learning a second language or third, or just an additional language, or pursuing tasks that stimulate our cognitively challenging have also been beneficial, like doing crossword puzzles or engaging in other cognitively impactful tasks on a daily basis in our lives has been shown to be very important at staving off hippocampal atrophy with aging and preventing the onset of impairment. And so another interesting principle for brain health is the allocentric spatial navigation. So allocentric spatial navigation can be thought of in contrast to egocentric navigation, where egocentric, it's very much first-person view, kind of something that you might see in video games, whereas everything is in relation to you. Whereas allocentric is when you take yourself out of that equation, and the items in the environment, you imagine them in the relation to themselves. You can think of it as thinking in terms of north, south, east, west, rather than to my right or to my left. And so this allocentric spatial navigation, individuals who engage in it spontaneously have been shown to have larger and more active hippocampi. They have increased resilience against neurodegeneration, and they have higher cognitive functioning. Now, it's not only spontaneously that you have to, naturally engage in it. There is actually evidence showing that in healthy and brain injured adults, spatial navigation training can help to reduce age-related hippocampal atrophy as well. So it is something that can be trained, which very much inspired us to try to apply this type of principle to the MS population. And one little tip for you at home, if you're ever interested in trying to engage more in the allocentric spatial navigation, try turning off your GPS when you're navigating, because that way, when you don't rely on an external map, you're actually utilizing your cognitive map of the environment to navigate, and that is very much utilizing the allocentric spatial referencing frames. So from this quick summary of literature, there are two key gaps that our research is addressing. First is the need for treatment for progressive multiple sclerosis, focusing on hippocampal neuroprotection and memory preservation. As we know pharmacologically, there isn't much out there that can help with cognitive impairment. There are only very few disease-modifying therapies for people with MS, and especially none of them so far have shown efficacy for improving cognitive capacity. And secondly, to develop a scalable and accessible and broad-reaching treatment with zero patient costs. It's very important that it be accessible, again, because people with MS do often have physical mobility impairments, and as accessible as it can be is best. And there is so little out there so far in terms of cognitive interventions. So yeah. So the summary of our objective, we aimed to evaluate the feasibility and preliminary efficacy of our online spatial navigation intervention to improve memory and stave off hippocampal atrophy. So our intervention, as I mentioned, harnesses the two principles of improving brain capacity, and it focuses on it's essentially a website where patients access it on like 5 times a week, and they log on, and every single week they explore a new city around the world. So they study the map of different landmarks and the different streets around the downtown area of a few major cities around the world. Then they learn to navigate those cities using Google Street View. And then at the end of each day, they're also asked a few questions to test their ability to remember where things are located and use their cognitive map. So without the help of a map, they need to answer some questions. And so they do this 1 hour a day, 5 times a week for 16 weeks. And it is fully self-administered, so no clinician needs to be supervising or present during these sessions. They get to do them any time of day, and they do it from home. And this can be accessed from a computer or a smartphone or a tablet. And our study design was a single-blinded RCT with a qualitative component. We've recruited patients, then we administer a baseline assessment that has some hippocampus-dependent memory outcomes, as well as an MRI scan of their brain. Then we randomize them to either complete the allocentric spatial navigation or to be in a wait list for 4 months. So they do not do anything for 4 months, they're just standard of care. And then after the 4-month period, both groups receive a follow-up assessment that again includes a readministration of the memory outcomes, the MRI scan, and then the treatment participants also receive a feasibility interview, while the waitlisted participants proceed to complete the intervention afterwards. This was our sample. So the study is still in progress. We're still actively recruiting, but so far we have about 7 people that have completed the intervention and 6 that have completed the control. And so far the feasibility findings are very promising. About 99.2% of all sessions were completed by all of the participants who completed the intervention. And we've had an 81% retention rate. Participants reported spending about 66 minutes on the intervention per session. All of them felt that it was suitable to the needs of MS patients, and 92 would continue with the intervention going forward. And the feasibility interview was really an interesting component because it allowed us to just in a free-flowing way ask participants what they thought about the intervention, and in a qualitative way assess what their experience was like. What were some of the likes and dislikes? And so some important likes were that they really enjoyed discovering new places. These are all cities they've never traveled to before, so they were all novel to them. They really enjoyed navigating, especially because many of them haven't traveled anywhere in a long time. And they also just enjoyed the challenging nature of it. Some of the questions do progress in difficulty over the course of the intervention, and they generally enjoyed kind of the challenge of it all. The key dislikes were some technical glitches, as well as the repetitive nature over the 16 weeks. They gave a general satisfaction rating on average of 8.9 out of 10. And yeah, so this was very enlightening for us, and there's very little literature available on technology uptake in this population, so this was of particular interest to us. In terms of preliminary efficacy, so we did find significant improvements on the tasks related to this intervention, such as route navigation and the end of day questions that they were asked to complete. And then there's also some promising changes in the hippocampus dependent memory that we measured. Specifically, we measured pattern completion and pattern separation. I won't get too far into explaining what that is, but feel free to ask if you're curious. But So we did note an improvement from pre to post intervention in the pattern separation, which is favorable, but also a decline in the pattern completion performance, which is also actually favorable. And this switch, this pattern is very much similar to what younger adults are like. Younger adults are also good at pattern separation, but they're not good at pattern completion. So this was a favorable change overall in the hippocampus dependent memory. And as a quick summary, our online protocol has been shown promising results in terms of being a remedial therapy for memory improvement and not just compensatory. It is feasible and has encouraging early efficacy findings that are generalizable to daily life. So the impacts on hippocampus dependent memory are considered to be more generalizable to everyday life and not just improvements on tasks, on intervention specific tasks. And also, it's promising that this self-administered telerehab that requires very few clinical resources is presenting itself with few barriers to treatment. Very few people have dropped out, and it's been super easy for people to participate in this intervention, even during the pandemic, as everyone is at home anyway. And majority of individuals do have access to some form of technology, whether it be a laptop or a smartphone or a tablet. And for the older population, it's often a tablet. So it's been a very, very accessible treatment, and it's promising that very few have dropped out despite not having any supervision during these sessions. And some of our next steps include continuing data collection to demonstrate hippocampal neuroprotection associated with the intervention. So I haven't presented the MRI analyses because we're looking at what happens to the hippocampi before versus after the intervention. So we do have that data, but we do need to continue collecting to be able to properly analyze that. Next, we're also planning to respond to some of the participant feedback regarding improvement of our intervention with the technical aspect of it, trying to figure out some of those technical glitches and also making it as user-friendly as possible. And we're also aiming to collaborate with some of our community members and clinicians to disseminate access to this intervention. And because it is online, it gives us the unique ability to connect with people just locally in the community, but also try to connect with everyone around the province, nationally, and potentially internationally to have this be an accessible intervention for people with MS anywhere in the world. And it is also not just people with MS, but as I mentioned, hippocampi are affected in multiple clinical populations and healthy aging. So one of our goals is to also make it accessible to anyone who might be experiencing cognitive decline in general. All right, and with that, thank you for listening. And here are my acknowledgements to our wonderful team who's been hard at work with this project. Thank you.
That's wonderful, Julia. Excellent talk, really fascinating work. And so as I mentioned earlier, what we're going to do is we're fielding questions from the chat and from one or two other sources as well. So we'll take a general Q&A for all of the panelists at the end. So just kind of if people have questions that they haven't put through yet for Julia, then there's still time. And we'll kind of integrate things in our Q&A near the end. So what we're going to do next, I'm actually going to move to Andrea for the next talk, because actually there's quite a nice transition from the work that Andrea is doing and the work that Julia is doing. And I think people will all kind of note the segue that I'm doing here, and I think it'd be a kind of cognitively helpful little link. So Andrea, please take it away.
Thank you so much, John. Let me get started. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to present. I'm going to talk about bringing cognitive network modeling to the clinic today. First, what is cognitive network modeling? Our team at the Krembil Center for Neuroinformatics of CAMH focuses on bridging symptoms in psychiatry to pathophysiology. So this is our cognitive network modeling team. just a quick zoom shot of everybody. So our team essentially brings together three innovations. On the one hand, we integrate cognitive tasks that probe specific symptoms in psychiatry, and that can be deployed on mobile devices with computational models of behavior that explain the behavior that is captured by these cognitive tasks, and non-invasive recordings. So we integrate electroencephalography and functional MRI to better understand the neural mechanisms underlying these cognitive tasks, or the learning process that is captured by these cognitive tasks. And we do this in order to address specific questions in psychiatry, such as whether a given patient will respond to treatment or other critical outcome measures. We focus on some specific symptoms in two disorders. In general, they would be described as psychoaffective disorders. So we focus on delusions in psychosis and suicidality in major depression. And today I will tell you a bit about how we probe specific delusions in psychosis and how that might help achieve some important clinical predictions. So specifically in psychosis, we integrate tasks that probe persecutory beliefs. And the reason for that is they are one of the kind of core symptoms in psychosis. And I will go through them in a bit more detail in the later slides. But basically, we employ probabilistic learning tasks that integrate reward with social cues that can be gamified and deployed on mobile devices, such as a smartphone, in combination with computational models that explain how aberrant learning patterns might lead to biased decisions in this particular task. And we focus specifically on how people incorporate surprise and their own confidence about their predictions of events in the world during learning. And then we look at, by integrating EEG and fMRI, we look at the kind of cognitive networks underlying this learning process in order to better understand how pharmacological interventions in psychosis work and why they might not work in certain patients. So psychosis in general is can be devastating for an individual because it leads to a complete breakdown in one's perception of the world and conception of reality. For example, a patient might report, "My senses are sharpened, sights and sounds possess a keenness that I've never experienced before." While another patient might say, "I had to make sense, any sense, out of all of these uncanny coincidences, and I did it by radically changing my conception of reality." And what is interesting about those testimonials is that they're quite distinct. They reflect psychosis in different ways. And what they might suggest actually is that psychosis itself is a process that has sort of a trajectory in the sense that perhaps some perceptions are more dominant at different stages of the disease progression. In Canada, schizophrenia, which is the manifestation of the disease associated with core psychosis symptoms, has a prevalence of about 1 to 1.2%. However, the a large proportion of individuals diagnosed with schizophrenia, so 1/3, require repeated institutionalization throughout their lives. And alarmingly, 40% of individuals with the disease will attempt suicide at some point in their lives due to psychosis symptoms. So what is psychosis, or at least what is the diagnosis of schizophrenia? Usually, the most common symptoms are hallucinations and delusions, and they have to be present for at least 1 month for a diagnosis to take place. Therefore, it means that diagnosis is usually given late during the disease progression. And the most common treatment for schizophrenia and what alleviates psychosis symptoms are dopamine D2 receptor antagonists, and sometimes in combination with cognitive behavioral therapy. However, there are certain symptoms that are treatment resistant, and the difficulty is that in spite of treatment, individuals rarely return to their previous level of functioning. So how do we better treat schizophrenia, and how can we help individuals afflicted with this disease? Well, it has to do perhaps with how we diagnose it and how we treat it. The challenges might very well lie there. First of all, diagnosis is often done late in the disease progression, as I mentioned, and it's very unspecific. So you could have individuals that show completely different symptoms, but receive the same diagnosis. And then treatment does not actually alleviate core symptoms. So it could be that you have 2 individuals with identical symptoms, but they show very different treatment response trajectories, and nobody really knows why. So how do we address this? Well, first, we want to start by focusing on a specific symptom, because we won't be able to understand the disease if we try to explain all these different manifestations, especially as this is a spectrum disease. So we're going to focus on some core symptoms. And in our lab, we focus on delusions, in particular, persecutory delusions. So in general, delusions are beliefs that are held with absolute conviction, persist despite evidence to the contrary, and are resistant to change. However, interestingly, 70% of individuals with psychosis experience persecutory delusions, like the feeling that the world is revolving around me, people are all in on it. These type of delusions are particularly troubling because they are associated with increased suicidality and higher relapse rates. So we want to understand how these persecutory beliefs form in the first place and why they persist. And to do that, we try to integrate, to design experimental tasks that probe specific aspects of those symptoms, tasks that are mobile, easy to use, so that they could be integrated in care. And we combine them with computational models that allow us to understand how these delusions emerge in the first place. And very briefly, the intuition behind the computational model is that the function of the brain is to make predictions about states in the world and update those predictions through their sensory systems using a quantity called prediction error, which is the surprise, the difference between what one has predicted and the sensory input that they received. And of course, at the basis of this conceptualization is the Bayes rule, and the conceptualization of beliefs in terms of probability distribution. So we have this famous Bayes rule equation that predictions change as a function of prior beliefs, sensory data normalized by the evidence. Now we take this Bayes rule idea and in a hierarchical fashion. So it's assuming that people are not only inferring on states in the world, but also the statistics of those states, which basically means that they're also learning about the rate of change of those states, how quickly, how stable they are, how volatile they are. And this gives rise to elegant update equations that map onto reinforcement learning and posit that belief updates change in time, not only as a function of prediction errors, but also as a function of precisions. Precisions are expressed in this case in a ratio, as a ratio, because the sensory precision augments the impact of incoming prediction errors, whereas the belief precision dampens the impact of prediction errors. Their difference is basically the sensory precision is associated with the data that you experience, whereas the belief precision is associated with your internal model that describes the hidden causes of that data. This is the graphical representation. I will just go quickly through this, but the idea is that you learn by updating, by incorporating changes in environmental context, and the rate of change that you infer on determines how quickly you update your beliefs about a given state in the world. Now we can use that idea to dissect these different stages of psychosis and propose that in the early phase, when people report that my senses are sharpened, their beliefs can be described in terms of enhanced precision-weighted prediction errors coupled with reduced top-level belief precision. So we have this kind of imbalance where the sensory precision overpowers the belief precision, and people react too strongly to surprising signals and incoming data. And that process leads to the emergence of delusional beliefs. Now, why are we integrating these computational models of behavior with these specific tasks? Well, we want to propose kind of a clinical tool that allows people to track the progression of delusions from the early stages. So we want to have a tool that allows us essentially to capture and quantify these beliefs within individual and how they evolve over time, and provide a readout both to the agent and to the clinician about how these beliefs are changing. And the idea, so we've worked on this a little bit and came up with an application that integrates different instantiation of GRASP, which is this integration of generative models for reward and social learning in the context of psychosis, and to use this as a tool for monitoring change in beliefs and assessing the impact of clinical interventions. So I will talk very briefly about the work of my PhD student, Daniel Hauke, who brought this essentially into the clinic, and using a task that assesses how people take into account the advice from others and estimate others' intentions through videos in a very kind of simple but engaging fashion. He's deployed this task in the context of early psychosis in a study with individuals who are at clinical high risk for psychosis and those that have a first episode of psychosis. And he looked at essentially how well the model captured individuals' behavior in this task. And basically, just to give you a flavor of that, what you find typically in the psychosis spectrum is that people show a behavioral effect in terms of advice taking. So they're less likely to adhere to the advisor's suggestions in both the clinical high risk and the first episode psychosis patients, but that this effect is less modulated by contextual changes. So the idea here is that individuals with psychosis have difficulty incorporating this rate of change, volatility, into their predictions about the other person's fidelity or trustworthiness. And what you can see here is that the model can simulate or can capture the empirical results pretty well. And there is one parameter of the winning model that that captures this group difference, where the first episode psychosis patients are on the very right, showing the most extreme change in belief updates as a function of prediction errors. And basically, what we plan to do with this approach is to look at the entire sort of early psychosis spectrum. So as looking at individuals who are at risk for developing psychosis, but also at those who have had a psychosis episode, and tried and essentially model belief updates in this specific context. And what we want to understand basically is this switch from being at risk to transitioning to psychosis. What aspects of the belief updating process are going wrong, such that one develops a crisis, which is in this case the emergence of a psychosis episode? Can we understand sort of the critical state of those beliefs at this very important stage? And for the future, we want to integrate additional technologies such as virtual reality, portable eye tracking, and to assess these beliefs in a more naturalistic, ecologically valid fashion, and also use this approach to assess what treatments might be more efficient in a given individual. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Andrea. Really fascinating work, and looking forward to discussing more in the Q&A. So let's move on quickly onto our final panelist, who is Jean-Philippe. Jean-Philippe, do you want to take it away?
Hi. You just share my screen. Okay. So thank you all for being here, and thank you for the invitation. So I'm Jean-Philippe Miron. I'm a psychiatrist from Montreal. My little relationship with Toronto was that I spent 2 years there for a fellowship in brain stimulation, in part at CAMH with Dan Bloomberger. And my talk today will be about increasing accessibility to Rtms in depression. Okay. So just for some background context, I'm sure everybody here is kind of acquainted with the notion of major depressive disorder. I'm sure you're all aware also that it's a major public health issue, especially in our post-pandemic world. Depression and anxiety disorders, diagnoses have been skyrocketing. And so far, in general, the first line treatment for depression Well, you have on the biological side, you have antidepressant medication, which are burdened by side effects. So people in general are not rushing to get those medication, And you also have psychotherapy, which does suffer from accessibility issues and also has less evidence in more refractory cases of depression. And unfortunately, there's about 30 to 40% of patients will develop refractoriness to first-line intervention. So that does leave a great amount of patients with depression who were not treated correctly or entirely, and we do need some alternatives. That's where brain stimulation, neuromodulation technologies come in. Simply put, neuromodulation is the ability to modulate the activity of the nervous system. You can increase the activity, decrease it. You can be very precise about it or have a very diffuse effect. You can have short or long-term impacts. Of course, in the treatment of disease, we want long-term impacts. And in psychiatry, it's been mostly used in treatment-resistant depression. The origin, we can say, of neuromodulation has been electroconvulsive therapy. So in the past, we used to call it electroshock therapy. It's still practiced to the surprise of some. In the end, it's a very safe treatment. It's usually well tolerated, except that there are some transient memory loss. You do need you need general anesthesia. So there is a low patient acceptability for it, even though it's still the most effective treatment that we have for depression. Still, because of that, researchers over the decades have tried to find new ways to administer, to use electricity on the brain. And that's where technologies like RTMS came in. So RTMS is repetitive transcranial magnetic stimulation, and it's been Health Canada approved since 2002. So it's not new, even though a lot of people have not heard about it. The first experiments in depression were in the mid-90s, so it's been around for over 25 years now. And essentially in RTMS, as you can see on the right, we use a big coil. We call it a figure-of-8 coil. Essentially, we place that coil on the forehead and we stimulate the prefrontal cortex. It's the magnetic field that is very powerful. It's similar to what we have in MRI machines. And typically in standard protocols in RTMS, we use a high frequency stimulation. So 10 Hertz, 20 Hertz. So it's very rapidly firing pulses that we send to the brain for a few seconds. Then there's a pause and then we do it again. And we do these cycles over several minutes. So a session of RTMS, right now it's anywhere between 3 to 10 minutes in the past. And it was up to 40 minutes. And a full course of RTMS is usually 30 sessions over 6 weeks. So it's fairly long. The big advantages are safety and tolerability, because it's a very, very safe treatment, no cognitive side effects, unlike ECT, and very little side effects in general. So this is kind of an example. This is probably one of the nicest picture I found of RTMS on the that's from one of the manufacturer, MagVenture. I have no relationship with them. As you can see, the patient is just sitting down comfortably in a treatment chair. There's no anesthesia, nothing like that. And you have an operator on the right who does the treatment. And they place a coil on the area that we want to stimulate, and we start the treatment, lasts a few minutes. That's pretty much it. The effectiveness so far, well, according to the most recent meta-analyses, we have in terms of response rate. So in depression, what we call a response is when people feel about 50% better compared to their baseline state. In RTMS, and you have to think that people in the RTMS trials in general, it's people who have had at least two trials of antidepressant, who have failed 2 trials of antidepressant. Either it was not well tolerated or it did not have any effect. So it's only people who have had treatment-resistant depression. And in this difficult to treat population, we have had response rates in general of 50 to 55%, which is really good, because if we were to just continue with medication, it would be maybe 15, 20% response if we're lucky. And remission rates are also in general pretty good. So remission in terms, when we're talking of depression, is when people are feeling 80 to 90% better. And in the case of RTMS, it's about 30 to 35%. Side effects, as I mentioned, very well tolerated in general. The worst really serious adverse event that can happen are seizures, but that is extremely rare, 1 in 30,000 every 30,000 sessions. The main side effect can be some amount of pain during treatment, but most patients really develop rapid tolerance to it, and it's really no problem. And there can be some headaches, some fatigue, but it's not much. Still, there are some issues with standard RTMS, because one of the questions you can have is, how come you say it's been around for 25 years now, but how come so little people have heard about it? Well, there are some issues with it. So even though it's effective, it's safe and well tolerated, it is costly. So to acquire RTMS rig, it's above $100,000. Then you need to factor in, consumables. You need to factor in the maintenance over time. You have to pay the salary also of RTMS operators. So it can be a bit of money. It's also a complex kind of procedure to do. You need some good training to do it. You don't need a PhD, but you need some training. And then the treatment course is over 6 weeks. So that can be difficult for people who live far away, who have families, who work, So during my fellowship, one of the objectives that we had was to try to brainstorm kind of novel ways to approach RTMS. So we tried to identify which problems RTMS had and try to find solutions. And we came up with a few solutions that we all tried to apply in a single study, kind of a proof of concept, we can say feasibility study. So very preliminary work. So I mentioned that in regular RTMS trials, just in general, RTMS, we use a high frequency stimulation. But there is also low frequency stimulation that has been used also, mainly 1 Hz stimulation that has kind of as an opposite effect in terms of cortical action. So instead of being excitatory like high frequency, low frequency stimulation would be inhibitory, but it still has antidepressant effect. There's been many trials that, and it's been confirmed in meta-analyses. And the advantage of 1 Hz stimulation is that it's even better tolerated than high frequency stimulation, but also it's cheaper to do. You can do it on a much cheaper stimulators, so you can save a lot of money there. Also, we brainstorm we try to think about how we can make RTMS simpler in terms of procedure. We custom made some tools also. And we delivered the treatment over a much shorter period of time. So for the one of the study that we did, it was in a sizable population, so 48 participants with depression. It was an open label study, feasibility study. So there were no comparator group. It was really to test the feasibility of this protocol. Patients were referred to us through our own depression treatment clinic. Most patients had long-standing chronic depression, and most of them were on medication. So we used an already validated 1 Hz protocol, which consisted of 360 pulses delivered over 8.5 minutes. And we delivered 30 sessions of treatment, not over 6 weeks, but over only 5 days. So people were receiving 6 sessions of RTMS spaced by about 50 minutes intersession pauses over 5 days. So it was intensive. And the main objective were to assess the safety, tolerability, and preliminary effectiveness of such a protocol, because essentially no one had done this before. So this is a picture of our treatment setup. So we built this from scratch. There was nothing there at the beginning. So at the bottom, you have the technician seat was overseeing all the treatment room. So in general, RTMS is delivered in single room, closed room. So you have one patient, one technician. But one of the ways that we thought to be innovative is to say, well, why don't we approach this like they do in oncology clinics? Usually you have a lot of patients in an open room setting. You have a nurse can take care of many patients receiving chemotherapy at the same time. Why don't we inspire ourselves with that? And there's no reason why RTMS patient couldn't be treated in an open room setting. And you have a lot of costs that you can save there, because you can have only one technician overseeing several patients having treatment at the same time, instead of having one operator for one patient. Also, our setup was a bit different from what you've seen in the first picture I showed at the beginning of a standard RTMS. Essentially, we custom made the RTMS coil arm. Sorry about the resolution of the picture on the right. That was the best I could find. But so on the right, you have the manufacturer-made arms. So these are the arms that usually people are going to buy to hold the coil and position the coil. These are pretty expensive. They're about $2,000-$3,000 each. They're not super reliable. They're pretty clunky. You can see that they have pretty much only two areas, two joints essentially. So they're not super easy to use. We don't like them. So we worked with an engineer who actually helped us build this arm on the left, essentially using camera tripod equipment. So very simple equipment, super flexible, and the operators loved it. You know, some of our operators have been doing RTMS for the past 10 years. They really enjoy working with this. It was much easier to use for them, and it allowed them to spend much less time by patients and to be able to attend to more patients at the same time. And the one that we made cost a fraction of what the manufacturer-made arms usually cost. The other thing that we worked about was about the coil itself. So on the right, you have the kind of standard figure-of-8 coil I mentioned at the beginning. So essentially, this coil is pretty big. It's thick because you need coolant, because when you deliver high-frequency stimulation, it's going to get the material very hot very quickly. So you need to have it either air-cooled or liquid-cooled. So those increases the complexity of everything that can break, which happens more often than we can think. So this can be an issue, and also these coils cost a lot. So with 1 Earth simulation, the advantage is that we don't need any cooling. So we can use very much simpler coils that are much cheaper. And the other problem with the figure-of-8 coil, so the coil on the right, the standard coil, is that it has a very small surface stimulation. So essentially in RTMS, the kind of what we're trying to hit in terms of size is about, you know, it's a loony or toony on the scalp. And those coils, essentially, they're not much bigger than that. So they're about, if you take a small foam coffee cup, you know, if you take the bottom of it, that's about how big it is. So it's not much bigger than our target. So what we did is that we tested new coils that had never been tested before in depression. So that's the one on the left. We call them parabolic coils. So they are a little bit hollowed inside, and they really nicely fit the shape of the head, essentially. And they are pretty big also. They're much bigger than the other one. They are not to scale. The parabolic coil is about 6 inches wide in diameter. So you really cannot miss your mark with this one. It's a very large field. It's almost impossible to miss the spot that you're trying to stimulate. So again, you're making the life easier for the operators. You're decreasing the odds of misplacing it, and it's also another option to have to make everything cheaper. Lastly, the treatment course. So I mentioned that usually treatment course of RTMS over 6 weeks. It's pretty long. I think most people who are on depression would like to see improvement faster than that, or to have the treatment delivered faster. So we did something that had never been done before. We delivered 30 sessions of RTMS over 5 days using the 1 Hertz protocol. And the only other study that tried to do something similar only delivered 18 sessions over 10 days. So that was much more intensive. So in terms of outcomes, the treatment was very safe. There were no serious adverse events. It was very well tolerated with about 20% headaches. It's very standard in RTMS. And regarding effectiveness, well, in terms of response rate, it was lower than what we find in meta-analyses in general. So we had a 35% response rate and a 27% remission rate. It was a little bit of a letdown, but you know, still, I think the main goal of this study was really to test the feasibility of our setup, and that we don't have any qualitative data about this, but anecdotally, patients really enjoy being in open room setting. Many of them came to us afterwards and said, well, you know, I like the experience because I felt less alone. I knew I was being treated with other people. So that had an effect, a positive psychological effect on them. Also, the operators liked it because they were not in their small room alone. They were in a big room. They could cooperate with one another. They really enjoyed their work more, and were able to be much more productive than if we only had working in a closed room environment with one machine, one patient, one technician. So this is kind of a graph of the results. So on the y-axis, you have actually a BDI score. So it's one of the scale that we use for depression. So the higher you are on the score, the more depressed you are. So at the beginning, people are they have high scores, and the objective is to decrease it, to treat them. And on the x-axis, well, you have the timeline. Essentially, on the red, you have people who have not responded to treatment. So you can see that at the beginning, their score didn't. The difference between the end and the beginning, not much changes there. But in green, you have people who have responded. In the orange shaded area, that was the accelerated part of our protocol. And the blue shaded area, that was what we call a consolidation phase, where people were getting some extra sessions because in other studies of accelerated RTMS, people sometimes were losing the effect a bit too quickly. So we decided to have this kind of phase just to help them try to maintain their improvement. And what we see is that really the bulk of the improvement really happened during those 5 days. Afterwards, it kind of plateaued a little bit. While we were doing that study, there was, maybe some of you heard about that, there was what they call the Stanford Accelerated Intelligent Neuromodulation Therapy for treatment-resistant depression. So the same trial out of Stanford, and that really captured the imagination of a lot of people, because in that trial they delivered an outrageous amount of session and each day, and each sessions were very intensive also, and they reported they were also using neural navigation, MRI based on MRI connectivity, functional MRI connectivity, and they reported up to 90% remission rates, which is something we've never seen. So we had the idea of thinking, well, we thought, well, maybe there are ways we could try to improve our protocol a little bit. So we did another open label study in 30 patients where we increased the intensity and duration of our protocol. So instead of 360 pulses, we used 600 pulses and used 40 sessions over 5 days instead of 30. So we increased everything. Once again, very safe, well tolerated, and this can be surprising to some people because you can think, well, how am I going to feel if I'm having my brain zapped over 8 hours a day for 5 days? But it was very well tolerated, which is great to know. And in terms of effectiveness, well, our numbers got a little bit better this time. So it was 43% response rate and 30% remission rate, which brings us a little bit closer to what we find in standard RTMS studies. So that was very exciting because we're able to do that with much cheaper equipment. We did things differently than what has been done so far. This is another graph again. So in red, people have not responded, and in green, people who have responded. And the blue shaded area was the treatment period, and we did follow-ups up to 4 weeks where we recorded the final outcomes. And as you can see, people kept getting better afterwards, which is kind of surprising. It's not something that we saw in the first study, really. And it's been reported in other accelerated RTMS treatment. We see some people who don't really feel an improvement during the treatment week, but afterwards, when you see them 3 weeks or 4 weeks afterward, they will say, well, the treatment kind of kicked in later, which is an interesting finding. So all in all, kind of the overarching idea behind this is RTMS is a very safe, well-tolerated treatment. Patients love it because there's very little side effect associated with it, unlike medication. And people would like to see that more because they would like to have this alternative of treatment for their depression. So, but the problem is that RTMS so far is very costly, very complex, and it's only, you're only going to find this in university clinic, or you're gonna have to pay a lot of bucks for that in private clinics. So our idea is to try to make RTMS simpler, cheaper, and to try to offer, you can try to imagine that there would be kind of a simpler first line type of RTMS that we could trial, that patients could maybe eventually have this as a first line option. So far they only have medication, they only have psychotherapy. Well, maybe we could add a kind of first line protocol of RTMS to the physician toolbox, especially the family physician, who could then offer this to their patients. You know, if we can make an RTMS protocol so simple that we match it with medication, so maybe $5–10 per treatment, then we have really an interesting solution that makes sense to use as a first line treatment. So what we're going to do is that we need to continue to pilot and try to optimize our treatment before we move on to a large scale RCT that could take the form of a non-inferiority study where we would randomize people to either our kind of RTMS protocol, or to take medication and try to figure out if it's similar in terms of effectiveness. And my big goal would be to be able to start offering this in more community environment, in community clinics to patients. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, JP. Sorry, I had a Zoom window crisis for a second there. Wonderful, and this is super important work, increasing the accessibility of TMS. It's really great to see from you and Dan and Jonathan and the international community really kind of, I think having a concrete benefit on people's lives in the short term. So great to see this work happening. So what we're going to do now for our remaining part of the panel discussion, we are actually a little bit over time already, but we want to squeeze in. We're going to aim for 10 minutes. So what I'm going to do now is I've selected from our quite extensive question list a single short kind of it's going to be basically a quick fire question, 1 or 2 quick fire questions for each of our speakers, and then I have a few kind of bigger picture questions that I want to throw to the group and see what people's thoughts are on that. So if people are game with an initial quick fire volley, I'm going to kick off with Julia. So Julia, 2 quick fire questions for you. One which came in the chat and I was also occurred to me as well was why is Canada disproportionately affected by multiple sclerosis? And second quickfire question for you is, with the intervention, the navigation intervention, would familiar cities be helpful as well, or more generally is novelty a useful factor for these Google Maps interventions you've been working on?
To answer the first one, still the cause is still largely being explored, but one contributing factor is the fact that we're in the northern hemisphere and there's less sun exposure, and diagnosis with multiple sclerosis is largely linked to vitamin D deficiency. Vitamin D supplements are actually one of the very first treatments for people that get diagnosed with MS, and so there's that link there with less sunlight, northern hemisphere, vitamin D deficiency, and stuff like that. And then to answer the second question, sorry, what was it again?
Yeah, so familiar cities and novelty. Is novelty a useful component in intervention? Yeah,
so novelty is actually quite important because for cognitive environmental enrichment and for, I guess, the best way to stimulate the brain is to be in a novel environment. It just makes you work a bit harder to try to figure out and remember where you are and to navigate around. If it's a familiar spot, it might not be as difficult. The challenge level might not be there, but it's actually very important that it's challenging, and novelty is a part of that.
Wonderful, thank you. So again, continuing with our quick fire round. onto Andrea. So, Andrea, is there any risk associated with promoting delusions in psychosis patients?
You mean promoting delusions through these cognitive tasks inadvertently, or just in general?
Yeah, I think that's the thinking behind that question. Yeah, with interventions where you're probing, I guess, to think about it that way. Is that a concern?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I mean, the idea when you present or when you design a task is, similar to what Julia was saying, bring people in a novel environment. So bring them in a setting where they won't have sort of strong, prior beliefs about what to expect. So they come in sort of like with a tabula rasa, so to speak. And then you expose them to new input that they have to learn about and make decisions about. And in a sense, you might expect that people might develop biases based on the input that you give, such as, let's say, jumping to conclusions or deciding too quickly. And it's actually that's actually part of the task as well. And one nice aspect of integrating these tasks with computational models is that when you see sort of biases develop, you can assess them objectively through the parameter estimates that are obtained from fitting the model to the data so far. So you could alter the task in such a way that they can be exposed to information that tries to kind of get them to unlearn or examine these biases that emerge over the course of the task.
That's great. That's great. Okay, last of our quick fire round, just one for you, Jean-Philippe, and I'm sure you've thought about this already. So one of the attendees is asking, will the tech TMS in general ever be available directly to the end user, or more generally, will costs come down and the technology advance such that it will permit development of things like in-home devices outside the clinic, outside the hospital, outside the city, I guess, things like that. So what are your thoughts in that area?
Yeah, I've actually, I did meet over time some engineers who were struggling with depression. And I remember one gentleman who actually had treatment in California initially. And it was really working well for him, but it was very costly and he couldn't just keep going there. So he actually built his own RTMS machine and he did show it to us. It was very neat, very interesting. So, I mean, the tech to do an RTMS apparatus is not very complicated. But I think that there would be a few regulatory challenges to kind of bring that from a clinic to home. The main issue, well, you will need all kind of safeguard to kind of, just something stupid like making sure that someone doesn't give RTMS to their kid or to their dog, or and also there's a kind of seizure aspect. But with low frequency stimulation, seizures have never been reported with low frequency stimulation, only with high frequency protocol. So it would be possible maybe to have low frequency devices at home eventually, but well, you're gonna have to go through the regulatory kind of challenges with Health Canada for that, do trials. It's going to cost a lot of money. Also, I mean, how exactly are we going to establish that? Because is it going to be like a lease? So patients are going to lease their machine for kind of a couple of months while they do treatment. Who's going to do that lease? Is the hospital or the private companies? Like, I don't think anybody knows. I think that one alternative, because one of the psychiatrists I worked with when I was in Toronto, Jonathan Donner, had this vision of having home RTMS device, and I think it's really interesting. But I think the first thing that we have to do first is to try to see, well, what do we have that can be done at home right now, and are we sure that we've really squeeze all the juice we can out of it? And one of those technologies is TDCS, so transcranial direct current stimulation, where you only have small electrodes actually that you put on the scalp, very low current, very low intensity current. It has shown some preliminary effectiveness in depression, schizophrenia, different even OCD also. But people have probably underused it because so far they've done all the trials in clinics. But for the ones who have seen those trials, those devices, it's very small. It's a small stimulator. You put a few batteries in it. You have the electrodes. You can find these on Amazon for $300-400. It's really, really cheap. So in the trial so far, people have kind of kept themselves at doing one session every day for 5 days because they only have if they wanted to do big trials in 300-400 patients, well, they only have a limited number of devices, so they were doing that in their clinic, so they were making the patients come in. But I think the next step is try to see, well, can we squeeze more out of TDCS? For example, if we release the device to the patient for 1 or 2 months, they can do session every day, so we might increase the effectiveness by having more session, and nothing stops us from doing multiple sessions a day of TDCS, like I've been doing with RTMS. So TDCS it's already Health Canada approved. People can buy them, they can have them at home. So this is one of my projects actually. I'll be submitting a protocol to my REB soon. The machines are on their way, and I would like to do some intensive at-home TDCS and try to see where it goes. So very good question.
Yeah, wonderful. And I'm glad you kind of moved to that direction in the answer, because that was absolutely kind of on what I was thinking in terms of where the at-home space is, really is electrical stimulation, and the tech side of that is super exciting. Like there's a lot that can be done in that space with components and technologies that are just coming through the kind of Silicon Valley, China, pipeline, and getting better and better and better. And that's something that, we're really going to see a lot of major developments very soon, I think. And hopefully they'll be effective. So, okay, we have 2 minutes. So I'm going to kind of throw out a question to the panel, and I'm going to just let everyone whoever wants to jump at it, have a stab, and we'll see how that goes. So there's a general theme that's come through in a lot of the questions, which is broadly speaking, where is the intervention that you've been describing? Where is it going next? What are the plans for rolling out? Some of you guys have spoken to that specifically, some not so much. But so part A, like where is it going next? But part B, with that in mind, like what is the current ecosystem of these new interventions, the new digital interventions, the new gaming interventions? What else is going on in that space? And where are there kind of good models of interventions that have like already been achieved that you're kind of following as what you're trying to do here, or is that just a completely unmapped territory? So yeah, those two questions, like what's the plan and what are other people doing? Okay, Andrea, I saw a hand.
Oh, so I think with what I discussed, these cognitive games integrated with computational models, they can be used in combination with cognitive behavioral therapy, for example, and there's already apps in that space. So I think the easiest integration would be to as a tool, as a useful module of CBT.
I think on my end, I would say probably what I would like to see eventually is to have a complete suite of brain simulation approaches, from the non-refractory states of depression with TDCS at home, for example, And if it doesn't work well, you have some first line RTMS approaches, and then you can move on to the more complicated RTMS approaches. And in the end, you have like stuff like the Saint protocol from Nolan Williams in Stanford, where you really have something for everybody. For me, this is really what I'm aiming at. And I think something that's really understudied right now is a combination of RTMS with psychological approaches. It could be either, I think it's difficult to do psychotherapy in 3 minutes, but you can have you could add some cognitive tasks, because we know, I mean, most of the knowledge that we have about our brain stimulation devices work is from studies on the motor cortex. And when we stimulate the motor cortex, we know that if we're trying to elicit a motor response, if my hand is at rest, I'm gonna have a little bit of a response. But if I'm having the hand already activated, I'm gonna have a big response. My whole arm might go. And I think there are parallels to probably what's going on in the prefrontal cortex. So what are you doing during treatment? Are you just, I mean, we're not controlling for that. Some people might be ruminating, or some people might be thinking about nothing. Some might doing mindfulness. Probably that we need to control what's going on in the mind, and also probably that we need to activate the circuits that we're trying to repair or have an effect on. So it might be making people do any kind of cognitive task that will engage those circuits. So for me, that will be kind of the next step. And I imagine, you know, having someone sitting down their RTMS chair with a kind of virtual reality set, doing some tasks, very futuristic. We'll see where it goes, but I think this is the way.
Great ideas there. Julia, do you have any final words?
Yeah, for us, we'd like to try to gamify our intervention a bit. So while exploring cities is interesting, but make it more about rewards and trying to have challenges throughout, because I think that will really help with the like motivation to continue doing it, and also help the retention rates. They have been a bit lower in traumatic brain injury population than MS, so the retention rates do kind of vary depending on the different population. We also did consider virtual reality. Because, you know, when you're navigating different cities, the more immersed you are in that city might really help to stimulate and engage that allocentric aspect. So we have considered that it can be challenged sometimes because it can cause nausea in some people. So we are still kind of exploring that. And then in terms of rolling it out, we do have partnerships with a few clinics, rehab clinics. So our goal is kind of to have this almost be like a prescription. So we have a few clinics that administer telerehab, like CBT and goal management training, stuff like that. And it would be interesting to have this as an additional module in those clinics that patients can sign up for and that clinicians can refer them to. And then we also did consider having rolling this out, just being publicly available to anyone as well. But our goal is to make it cost-free. So there's still some more research to do and some more partnerships to create to make that happen. And it would be great, of course, to have some sort of a collaboration with Google to have this be a more seamless integration between like our platform and the Google Street View. Yeah.
That's super exciting. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do with this in the next few years. Well, so apologies to everyone for us going over time, but I think everyone will agree it's been really worthwhile hearing everything that our speakers had to say. So I just want to thank once again Julia Ripkena, Jean-Philippe Miron, and Andrea Diaconescu. Thank you, everyone, and have a good evening.
Excellent. Great. Thanks so much, John. And then, yes, again, I'll echo that sentiment. Thank you to our speakers for the incredible talks. I know I certainly learned a lot, and I look forward to continue learning in this portion of the event, which is our community pitch. Thanks to the community pitch participants as well, who have been on the call for some time now, for their patience as we work through the incredible conversations and content and learnings together. So now we're going to run through this community pitch portion of the evening, where we're going to hear from companies with operations in Toronto. And I think we're going to start things off with Telemag Health. I do know we have some folks from that company on the line, and then we'll follow that up with V-Light before finishing, before then Redispec after V-Light, and then branch out to round things off before we turn it over to our community to see if there's anyone on the call that would like to contribute their thoughts and ideas. So again, we do encourage you to ask your questions in the Q&A in the chat. Please feel free to also let us know if you'd like to unmute and turn your video on and ask questions directly to our community pitch presenters today. And with that said, I will turn it over to Telemag Health to pitch about their company.
Yes, thanks. Can you hear me? It's George Hathaway here, masquerading as Jana Dogel. I had to sign on under her name, but I'm George Hathaway, and I'm the president of Telemag Health, and we're in Toronto, or near Toronto, actually in Mississauga, and we are basically fitting ourselves into pretty well exactly what Jean-Philippe has been talking about in an excellent presentation just a few minutes ago. Our goal has been to produce eventually a home-based unit for Rtms of full capability. And we have been working on that for some time and have virtually, in a couple of days, we'll have completed our initial prototype. And the objective is pretty well everything that Jean-Philippe and Jonathan Downer have been advocating for quite some time. So I'll turn it over to Jana, the real Jana Dogel, who will continue.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Jana Dogel, and I'm VP of Business Development for Telemag. And I understand we have only 4 minutes. So I'll present a modified version of what we usually present to everyone who is interested in us. So just we'll skip a couple of slides. I'll try to see if I can do share screen. Yeah, that seems to be working. I hope everyone can see the screen now. Hold on a second. Yeah. First of all, we're a relatively young company, incorporated in January last year. But George, who is also an engineer and has personal connection or experience with depression through a family member, he thought there is a better way to approach this. And he came up with the innovation that allowed to simplify significantly Rtms device and also improve it in certain areas. We are also one of the winners of Entrepreneurship Award by Ontario Brain Institute. That's exciting to be recognized by this organization, and definitely helps us to move forward. So I'll skip this quickly. We all know depression, the problem is big and real. Around 25% around the world affected by this, which means, you know, chances are some of us who is sitting in this, actually each of us either affected by it or will be, or knows someone close to them who is suffering from depression. And the problem is becoming even bigger with COVID and things like that. So the challenge, as Jean-Philippe was mentioning, that Rtms is highly efficient in treating the depression or major depressive disorder, but the present standards is you have to go to a clinic, it's bulky, it's expensive, and not so many doctors can afford to purchase the equipment to offer the treatment. So what we came up with is much better version in our mind. So as you can see here, this is the coil. I don't know if George, you have it with you right now, because no? Okay. George is in his home-based office, so he doesn't have it to demonstrate to you. But as you can see here in this picture, this is the coil. And for those of you who had experience with Rtms, would quickly recognize the simplicity of it. And as you can see, this is our older version prototype. So as you can see, it can be fixed on the patient's head without any supportive arm or whatsoever. And on top of it, we managed to fit the whole power supply that fuels coil to produce the magnetic field in sort of medium-sized suitcase, I would say. So now you can wheel the system around, you know, the house or from place to place, And our vision is to have a nurse or a treating healthcare provider to come to the patient's house with the device. So this, with our innovation, this becomes extremely possible. And addressing safety issues, and it's relatively safe system, Rtms in general, but we don't want, as John Philippe was saying, we don't want a dog, to play with it, or a child. So that's why in our vision, we want a healthcare provider to come to the patient's house with this device. And again, this is a little bit maybe too long for this presentation, but in brief, the reason we can take it to the home now is because we can plug it into the wall. So typically Rtms system, they require 220 volts, so highly customized, highly specialized healthcare settings. Now with our innovation, you can plug it into the household mains, 120 volts, and this makes it quite possible to take it to the patient's house. Another problem that's typically quite common for commercially available Rtms devices is that the coils overheats a lot. So you kind of have the whole cooling system in place and making sure the patient is not like overheated through the patient's skin or head. So on. So with our innovation, we fixed and significantly improved this problem. So all of this together makes the system portable. So this is our core innovation, that we created the system that as efficient as commercially available Rtms, but more convenient and portable at the same time. And there are some of the specifics. I will leave this for Q&A just to save the time. And our goal is to sell it to their psychiatrist, or and then later on to maybe family doctors, and send it closer to community centers in remote locations. So patients don't have to travel 2 hours to Toronto, for example, to have a treatment, but can have a treatment close by. And this is our business model. And, those things we usually compare for our investors who are interested in investing in us. But I'll focus on those, that none of the competitors can offer portability, and they're all focused on clinics, while we can do both clinics and home care. Just a quick slide about our team. So George, president and the key inventor, he has over 40 years of experience in engineering, physics, and things like that. Myself, I'm a former scientist. I have a PhD in physical chemistry and advanced materials. Then did my MBA, switched to business, and that's what I'm doing right now. The third co-founder is Joe Palermo, who is not on this call. He has over 30 years of experience in power supply designs, designing highly complex system with, military specs and things like that. So highly stringent and with high safety requirements. And Jim Sigala, also not on this call, he's helping us with some modeling of the magnetic field, making sure that we can produce the same magnetic field as required for the treatment. So I would stop sharing, and if there are questions, we will take them now. Again, sorry, we're rushing through. We were not everything last minute, but we are quite excited to be here for sure.
Thank you so much, both of you. It was an incredible talk. Yeah, even though it was certainly shorter than I think we would like to have to hear from you. I bet we could organize a whole event around your innovations, and hopefully we can one day. We do have 2 questions, and I think we'll just address them now. And for this session, we'll look to address the questions after each pitch, and then we'll roll into the next pitch after these questions, which will be V-Light. So the first question comes from the Zoom chat and builds off of what you're saying about making sure that it's comparable in strength to some of the other conventional RTMS technologies. Will your system have enough power for theta burst RTMS?
Yes, I can answer that.
Yeah.
Theta burst, typically theta burst is suggested for 75% or 100% of MSO, it's called. In that case, we would not be able to compete. There is a physical fundamental limit to how much current you can draw from 120 volts. We could produce theta burst at a much lower stimulation intensity, probably maybe 20–30% perhaps, we're just guessing. But we can produce the DASH protocol. We can do the 10 hertz standard old protocol, as it's called. But theta burst is probably at 100% or 75% MSO out of the physically not possible.
And there are also safety issues that become even more concerning in this case, because as John Philippe was mentioning, with low frequency, there is almost no risk of seizure, but the higher you, 10 hertz is considered safe. And that's what we're aiming for. But with 50 hertz, it's becoming even more an issue.
Great, thank you both. Before I continue to the next question, I may just ask John, who asked that question, do you have anything else to add or to follow up on that? And maybe I'll throw it to Jean-Philippe as well, or Dr. Miron, to see if he has anything to comment. Okay, fantastic. And so the next and final question for you then is, in considering that it will be run off of the household power, it seems that there may be some costs that I guess will be imparted on the end user. Is there any thoughts or plans around how this could be subsidized or that would work with the user so that they wouldn't necessarily incur additional costs at home? Yeah.
George, do you want to take this?
Well, are you referring to extra costs like electricity costs? Or
I think that's what they're getting at here. It says no, given that it runs off house power. So no, given
that it's going to be operating at on the average probably about 10 amps from a 120 volt system, and it's only going to be running for maybe 37 minutes or maybe shorter. The additional cost is going to be in dollars per month, rather than tens or 20 or hundreds of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, certainly well worth it, considering the important application of that technology. And congrats as well. I'll take this opportunity to say congrats for your entrepreneurship funding. It's a wonderful program, and I'm sure it's serving you well.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay,
thank you everyone.
Great. Thank you so much. We'll hand things over next to Dr. Alison Smith from V-Light. You should have sharing screen permissions, so away you go.
Wonderful. Just bear with me for a moment. Okay, and here we go. Good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you. My name is Alison Smith, and I'm a neuroscientist at a company called V-Light. And tonight I'm going to show you a brand new innovation, a brain stimulation device that we are about to launch in the next couple of months. So for those of you who are not familiar with V-Light, we are a company that manufactures photobiomodulation devices. Photobiomodulation is the application of red or near infrared light to the tissues of the body. And in the case of V-Light, we create brain stimulation devices that provide transcranial photobiomodulation. And these devices are specifically designed to enhance cognitive performance and brain health. We were first incorporated in 2011, and we have been selling our photobiomodulation devices globally for the last 10 years. These are images of our current headsets that are on the market right now. All of these headsets emit 810 nanometers of near infrared light. The Neuro Alpha is pulsed at 10 hertz. The Neuro Gamma is pulsed at 40 hertz. And the X Plus is held continuous. We have a variety of different customers that are interested in our devices, from those who want to enhance cognitive performance throughout the aging process, meditators who want to take their practice to the next level. We also have biohackers, elite athletes, and neurofeedback practitioners. At V-Light, research is a huge focus at our company. We currently have 14 different studies on the go right now with various academic institutions across the US and Canada, looking at how the Neuro Alpha or Neuro Gamma affects things like traumatic brain injury or post-concussion syndrome in ex-professional athletes. We also have a pivotal clinical trial on the go right now looking at the effects of the Neuro Gamma in the Alzheimer's population. Our research thus far has focused in on the Neuro Alpha and Neuro Gamma, which are locked in at either 10 hertz or 40 hertz. And this has limited research or researchers who really want to look at how photobiomodulation of varying frequencies affects brain activity and brain health. So we developed a new product called the NeuroPro. This is going to be the most advanced transcranial photobiomodulation device on the market. It comes with 2 headsets. The first headset has 6 LED modules. The second headset, called the X Plus, has 1 LED module. We also have an intranasal unit, the controller, and the app. The user does not need to use all of these headsets simultaneously. They can pick and choose which one they want to use at any given time. And this is the first V-Light product that is app controlled. So the NeuroPro app allows a user to modulate frequency between 1 and 10,000 hertz, power between 15 and 100 milliwatts, session duration up to 255 minutes, and the most important aspect is module control. So each of the 8 LED modules that are available in the NeuroPro can be programmed separately or turned off. Users can also create a frequency sweep or a power sweep. They can start frequency or power at a certain level and ramp up over time according to step size and step duration. And all of their custom programs can be stored within the library of the app. This device was designed for those who are interested in exploring photobiomodulation and the effects of frequency. We are most interested to supply clinical researchers with a device in order to understand how photobiomodulation affects brain activity and brain health. If you are interested in learning more about what we're up to at V-Light, you are more than welcome to contact me personally at allison.smith@vlight.com. Thanks so much.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you so much, Allison. I must say, as an aside, I know V-Light well. I know the team there, and it's so nice to see the next phase of V-Light, the next offering that you have. I'd love to spend as much time as possible talking about the decisions that went into building out the app and the NeuroPro, but I think for the sake of time and understanding that we've had a few of our community pitchers on the line for some time now, I'll ask one quick question, and then we'll look to move on to our final community pitch. So, looking at the programming that you're building into the app controlled feature, will you work towards maybe like an ideal program or kind of suggested programming for particular use cases, or is it really going to be kind of user generated entirely?
So right at the moment, in terms of pre-programmed programs, we're only offering, say, the preset alpha and gamma, because we want to create programs that are based on published data. So transcranial photobiomodulation is the research into this type of brain stimulation is still in its infancy. And we are hoping that researchers are very interested in using this device in order to help us to understand the right types of protocols to invoke the right types of reactions or brain activation modulations. So as we learn and as data comes in, we will create these pre-programmed programs for our users.
Fantastic. Thank you. I look forward to finding out more and trying the next gen myself. And I guess anybody who's interested in learning more about photobiomodulation can direct their attention to your website, where I believe you have some of the scientific articles and whatnot that have been produced on that subject. So thanks again, Allison. And okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to our third and second last community pitch, which will be ReadySpec. I believe we have Catherine Bornbaum on the line representing ReadySpec. Hello.
Hi there.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your patience, and please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Just going to share a screen here. So thank you all for the opportunity to be here and speak with you tonight. My name is Catherine Bornbaum, and I am the head of clinical operations and partnerships here at ReadySpec. And I'm going to be talking to you today about some of the exciting innovations and updates that have been happening with the company. So just to start things off, ReadySpec's mission is to enable widespread, early and accurate detection of Alzheimer's disease indicators with accessible and scalable screening. So it really drives everything that we do. And how we go about this is by using a very simple test that can be considered part of a routine eye exam. So in essence, we attach a special kind of camera called a hyperspectral camera on top of just a commercially available, regulatory approved, it's called a fundus camera, or a camera that you'd encounter in your eye doctor's office. And what's really special about this is that a regular camera sees color in 3 channels called red, green, and blue. So this would be, similar to what your cell phone would take pictures of. But when we attach this hyperspectral camera on top of that, we're actually able to see more than 100 channels of color. And through this really, really rich data, we're able to capture just unbelievable information from the eye, which is directly connected to the brain. And through this process, we can apply our spatial spectral convolutional neural network, or AI, in order to detect the unique signatures of biomarkers of Alzheimer's disease. So what's really exciting about this is that it can be used seamlessly as a part of a clinical workflow. So this can take place in a memory clinic or a neurologist's office, or eventually in your eye doctor's office as a regular part of screening. And what's really exciting for us about this is that there's no need for an ophthalmologist or optometrist. It can be performed by any technician. We can provide results in just a few moments, and it can be performed fully on site so that you can streamline the decision making. Importantly, we're very focused on adoption, meaning that we are seeking opportunities to reduce the burden on both the patient and the healthcare system. So physicians care about true biomarker confidence. They want to understand what's really happening biologically within the body. So we provide that information, which really extends beyond the current modalities they have, such as cognitive-based assessments. It's very patient friendly. There's no need to ingest any tracers. There's no needles for blood work or spinal taps or any radioactive isotopes as required for PET tracers. So it's very, very friendly for the individual who's having the test done. It's very quick. You don't need to wait weeks for your results like you would with a PET or a blood test. And it can be performed by any technician who undergoes the training, which is effectively just a few hours, which is great. It's very simple to use. And importantly, we are very financially attractive. It is much, much more cost effective than the status quo, which makes it really, really exciting as a potential screening option for widespread use. Importantly, we've had some exciting traction. The Alzheimer's Drug Discovery Foundation has invested in ReadySpec through their Diagnostics Accelerator Fund, which was put together by Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos and company. The ADDF is sort of the hallmark foundation for supporting Alzheimer's disease research. And of all of the companies that they assessed, they believe that our technology stands out as a really unique diagnostic tool. So we're very, very excited about that. In terms of our traction and what's ahead, ReadySpec and Gentex are proud to announce their partnership just a few months ago, which is really going to help ReadySpec accelerate towards our next scale-up initiative. It's a commercial partnership that includes a direct investment in ReadySpec, and we're able to leverage Gentex's vast expertise in machine vision, imaging, and electronics manufacturing. So we're absolutely delighted to partner with Gentex, and we are very excited about what this partnership will bring to ReadySpec's future. Importantly, while our focus remains right now on Alzheimer's disease and its detection and diagnosis, importantly, this type of technology has applications for a wide variety of neurodegenerative disorders and ocular disorders as well. So we are very excited about applying this in other modalities and other diseases and a variety of different opportunities in future. So we'd be delighted to answer any questions you might have or to share some of our current or future plans. So I look forward to the discussion. Thanks very much. And please feel free to be in touch should you have any questions.
Wow, wonderful. Thank you so much, Catherine. That is incredible. And I'll start by saying, and congrats on the ADDF investment as well. As you said, that's a wonderful show of faith. And I know the ADDF from another chapter of my life, and I have great respect for them. So it's a testament certainly to the incredible impact that you're already having. So we did have one question from the audience, and I have a question myself that I'll ask, and I'll just take the time now to ask for those that are still on the calls. If you have any questions at all, now is the time. I'm happy to relay them to the community pictures, or you can also unmute and show your face and ask yourself. So the first question that we received was, how are you measuring the accuracy of your screening? And I guess could you compare that against maybe some of the other canonical screening that's happening currently?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So we are a very science-driven company, and we measure against either PET or CSF, which are the current sort of clinical standards for diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease biomarkers. So yeah, that's absolutely our ground truth. And we do have a preclinical pipeline that assesses against autopsy, which is the true gold standard for diagnosis. So, yep.
Excellent, thank you. And we did actually have another question come in here, so I will ask this now. Can your device be miniaturized further?
That's a great question. So yeah, right now we are using off-the-shelf components, so existing fundus cameras that are already in eye doctors' offices. But certainly the long-term plan is to have a more handheld device. So it's in the works, and it's part of our excitement about partnering with Gentex, who specializes in this type of engineering and work. So stay tuned for future iterations. We're really excited about that. So can't share yet, but keep an eye on us.
Pun intended, no doubt. Excellent. Thank you so much. I'll pause briefly to see if there are any other questions coming in from the audience. And then we will turn it over to Ty McKinney from Branch Out to give a community pitch, and then we'll look to close things out.
Thanks very much.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Catherine. Really do appreciate your time and expertise tonight. I'm so excited to follow ReadySpec from now into the future. Congrats.
Thank you. Take care.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, I will kindly ask that Ty turn on his camera and on mic and pitch us all the amazing things that Branch Out is up to, or maybe a few.
Awesome, thank you very much. And then just while this is loading up, amazing content tonight. The science was really engaging, and it's very inspiring to see all the innovation in some of the companies. I think I learned about a couple of new ways to go about stimulating the brain and make it more portable and accessible. So very exciting stuff. And this broadly relates to Branch Out's overall goal, which is trying to accelerate non-pharmaceutical and tech-based approaches to treating neurological disorders. And this really came out of appreciating there's a gap in the healthcare system that if you were to have some sort of a neurological disorder, there'd be lots of pharmaceutical-based approaches, but oftentimes physicians and doctors are less aware of dietary and lifestyle factors and other approaches like that that could potentially be disease modifying. So this was kind of the goal that Branch Out was formed with, was trying to create research in order to address some of these gaps. So right now we fund at 8 different universities all across Canada, from BC all the way to Ontario. And our flagship program is our student salary grants. So this is kind of the bread and butter of how we go about supporting various initiatives. So we have 2 different levels at the moment. Unfortunately, the application deadline for this year just closed, but you can definitely apply for the 2022 cycle. So we offer funding for undergraduate students to work in a research lab over the summer, $7,000 for the May-August timeline. And for this one, the deadline is typically in late January. We also offer a graduate level grant open to all pre-candidacy or pre-qualifying exam graduate students, master's and PhD, for up to 2 years of funding with 1 year of pending renewal. The deadline for this one tends to be in March. These are the 2 programs that really help us cultivate the core of Branch Out's alumni community. We've had a very strong track record of our students getting engaged with other fundraising initiatives, science communication events, and things like that, to really help our students not only receive money, but accelerate their career in that direction, but also help groom them to be broader professionals that are able to operate within the community with a greater fidelity. But one of the areas that we realize that is really being underserved at the moment is in that laboratory to bedside translation. So for that reason, new this year, we're pleased to announce what we're calling impact grants. So these are small grants up to $2,000 that will be awarded quarterly for different initiatives that could be used to take research within our NeuroCam model that could be brought into the community, and finding ways to take this academic research, just make it much more impactful in a number of different ways. A few examples of how these funds could be applied for is to host an event to help educate people about different approaches to treating NeuroCam based on someone's research. Also, there's a number of companies that present tonight, and if you have some entrepreneurial ambitions, you could also use this to get some early initial funding in order to start the commercialization process of your research. So that way you can take it directly out of the lab and start helping it function within more real-world settings. As well as the possibility to collaborate with other community-based organizations to either service the community in different ways, or again, help integrate research within much more of a real-world setting. So again, really trying to go from the whole gamut of basic to applied research and beyond. And in Toronto specifically, we actually have some funds that are earmarked for multiple sclerosis projects. So if anybody believes that their technology or their research could be of benefit to patients struggling with multiple sclerosis, I definitely encourage you to apply for this one. And then one other example of an event we'll be starting up in June 6th is we're actually be partnering with the Brain Change Initiative, an organization that's local to Toronto. This is based on a doctor's story who he received a TBI and used exercise and other principles of healthy living and lifestyle modification in order to accelerate his recovery and return back to completing his practice. So now he's taken upon himself to do weekly runs for neurogenesis. Because as I'm sure many of you may know, one of the best ways to create new brain cells within your hippocampi is to engage in aerobic physical activity, to really get your heart pumping and get your brain and your heart synchronous together. So this year, really pleased to announce that we'll be partnering with Brain Changes for a fundraising event with their June 6th launch. And that this event is going to be going from a Toronto-based event to an event that's national in scale. We've got some people interested in joining and creating local runs all the way from Victoria to Calgary, Montreal, and I believe Ottawa as well, in addition to Toronto. So if you're interested in running, this could be a really good opportunity to help do something good for your own brain, as well as raise some awareness for a great cause. One other opportunity we like to provide our students is being able to present to different members within the communities. So last year, when we were faced with the pandemic, we started doing these lunch and learn webinars remotely with a number of different students. So that way they could talk with different people from different corporate organizations within the Calgary area, since that's where we're based out of. In order to help spread awareness for our neurochem initiatives and other principles of healthy brain initiatives. And this year we're going to expand it into including also just free talks towards the general public. So again, really trying to expand that. So if you're interested in learning about some of the research the branch out has funded, this could be one exciting way to get involved in that way. And we're always interested whether or not someone might have some additional ideas on a webinar that we could pitch as well, as long as it's within our funding mandate. We're always open to different collaborations as far as that goes. If you're interested in any of these opportunities, I'll get this information shared around through the event organizers, but the information there for our website as well as our various social media pages. So that's the best way to find out about all these different initiatives on an ongoing basis. Some of them have just started off, so we'll be announcing them through social media once they officially launch. And then just again, a final thank you to all the organizers for the event this evening. Again, it was truly inspiring to see all of the amazing research that's happening and some of the cool entrepreneurial initiatives happening as well, especially within the brain stimulation realm. So there's some of my contact information if anyone would like to reach out. And with that said, I'll return it back to Brian for any final wrap up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Ty. I do have a few questions here and some comments as well. And then again, just a friendly reminder to those on the call that, please feel free to contribute your thoughts, your ideas, your questions, comments, etc. So I've got to say, first off, thank you to you and your organization for targeting students in your funding program. I think it's critical, especially now with a lot of conversation about what the future of academic training will look like, that students feel supported and have opportunities to acquire grants. And so it's really nice to see that you're covering that gap. And so looking at the student projects, do you have any examples of maybe some of the undergrad students or grad student projects that have been successful?
So Julie and Jean-Philippe were actually two of the branch out projects that we funded. So those are a couple examples. So at the graduate level, I actually don't think we funded any undergraduate. We actually just announced, it's not public yet, but there's a couple projects at University of Toronto that we were funding. One is looking at a speech therapy approach to try to tackle sleep apnea. So the idea is that you would do these different throat exercises that strengthen the muscles within your larynx. I'm not a throat person, so I'm not sure. But the idea is that when those are strengthened, they're not going to collapse while you're during sleep. And as a result, this could be a non-pharmaceutical way to try to tackle sleep apnea. Since the current leading approach as CPAP machines don't have particularly good compliance, because as you might guess, sleeping with a mask attached to your face is not particularly comfortable. So that's one example of some research we funded local within Toronto.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ty. I look forward to hearing more about that as it becomes public. It's really interesting to consider when novel interventions are developed, and it looks more so towards things you can implement in your lifestyle or your daily activities that will help. I love it. One other thing I personally wanted to comment on is I love this running campaign that you're rolling out, and I envision maybe equipping individuals with mobile EEG eventually. We could run like a little EEG study in the real world during one of these running campaigns. I know some folks actually in your area that are doing some really cool mobile EEG stuff on bikes. So I'm sure it would be portable to the running campaigns. One other question. Oh, please comment.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I've been following some of the research with the biking and EEG, and that's super cool as well, especially having been able to minimize some of the movement artifacts. I feel like running might be yet another level of challenge, but not insurmountable.
Certainly, yeah, it's a little more high impact as far as I can recall. It's been a little while since I've gotten out there, but I can understand that it would add some extra levels of control and consideration for that. We can talk about it for sure. Okay, another question I had, because the impact programming seems relatively new, and you're running it quarterly. Is there opportunities for follow-on funding for a successful project? If they're awarded in Q1, can they then apply again for funding in Q2 and onward?
Yeah, so basically when people apply for the impact grant, we'll retain the applications for up to a year. So we'll be announcing at least one award quarterly, but because we're donation based, if we happen to have a quarter where we have higher than expected fundraising, we might be able to award more of those impact grants. And then it's really again for those projects that might not necessarily find a home to be funded anywhere else, kind of those the ones that fall through the cracks, so to speak.
Yes, most certainly. Again, a testament to Branch Out's careful consideration of how you can fill these gaps in kind of conventional funding streams. So again, huge hats off to you. Thank you. One final question here I'll ask, because I know we do have a few students on the line as well, still, and students that will be approaching their university careers very soon. Are there any kind of restrictions in terms of the student eligibility for your funding? Like would they have to be third year, upper year, I guess?
For the undergraduate, no. It's all based on like whether or not like the research fits within our mandate, and it seems like it would be a good learning opportunity for the students and the research to be feasible to conduct on the timeline. And then, of course, if you're a good science communicator, that will strengthen your application quality because you'll be able to, convey the important points of your research more concisely. And then as far as the graduate level funding, the only requirement we have is that they be pre-candidacy, just so that way we can fund research that has not yet happened and hopefully, shape the narrative as opposed to just, fund someone for finishing up their PhD.
Most certainly, I can relate to that most intimately, being a PhD student during the day myself. Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Ty. That's everything that we had for you. And thank you to all of our community pitchers. What a fantastic shotgun of all the overview of all the incredible neurotech and related stuff happening in Toronto. I'm really excited to see so much activity and to see the community in Toronto thriving. And hopefully we can do this again sometime. So this will kind of formally end the event. I'll let everybody go. Thanks again for your attendance. You have your info if you want to follow up. And again, we are recording this so you can watch it at your leisure and kind of further pull out information that you need. We're always available online as well, pretty easily through a Google search, either myself at Neurotech X or Branch Out. And then I will say if anyone else would like to contribute their thoughts and ideas or questions as people trickle off the call, please, this is your time. Beyond that, have a wonderful evening. Thank you again to Branch Out for making this event possible, as well as all the speakers, our community pitchers, the attendees, and of course, all the people working behind the scenes here to make this possible. So thank you. Have a wonderful night. Happy Wednesday, and we will talk soon.